These two right here that we're looking at are the fifth longest tenured radio broadcast duo in Division I basketball. Greg Wrubell, Mark Durrant, they've been on the mic together for 28 years. So who better to talk about the postseason right now and the Big 12 and the Big Dance than these two? We welcome you back to the Wise Guys. I don't know if we've ever been together like this. This is fantastic.
This is like the feud. I feel like Richard Dawson should be up here. Let's go.
You guys would win the feud.
Now listen.
Yeah. Only because I have Dave on my team.
We Googled the top 5 rock bands who are currently on tour still. Rolling Stones, Bruce Springsteen, U2, Coldplay, and Metallica. By our calculation, that would make you guys the Metallica of basketball announcers who are currently on the job. How do you feel about that?
I'd appreciate that. We might need some more hair.
Did you guys know that number, that you're the 5th longest tenured combo? Did you already know that?
I was aware.
You knew that?
Are our mics good? It feels like we're, there we go.
Yeah, you got us?
We're a little in the background. Are we okay?
You good, DJ? Yeah. You okay over there?
Mark's nice and rich now.
Yeah, you guys okay in your headsets? Because
Do you want yours turned up?
You can turn you up a little bit here.
Yeah.
I could use a little more, but I'm not sure if my mic is on. I feel like Mark's is.
I think yours is, but
you think?
we just can't hear
you.
There
we go. No, there we go.
Are you better?
We got better things now.
Okay,
there we go.
Okay.
So live stream.
There we go. Yeah, no, on that first thing, I would take Metallica in a heartbeat. That's great.
You like Metallica?
Over the other, what about over the other bands?
Well, no, I'd be pleased to be one of the others as well, but I'll take Metallica. Absolutely. If that's the 5, I'm there. By the way, we have
an option. He'll take it.
Yeah, Rush has since disbanded for sad reasons.
For variety of reasons.
Yes. We have been on together, all 4 of us, but Mark was remote last time.
That's
I think
right.
I was here.
Yeah,
Mark was
right.
on a screen somewhere, but together, this is the first time.
Mark's been here in studio before.
Yeah, and I've been here in studio.
And you've been in studio before,
I
but
avoid
together.
Greg at all costs.
So Dave and I have been calling games together in television since 1989. So we get
between
it.
the 4 of us,
we get it a little bit.
Yeah.
We get it a little bit, but what's been the glue that's kept you guys together for that long? I mean, that's a heck of a run, guys. It really is.
Mark's high level of patience.
No,
that's it. That is clearly it.
Is that Mark? Is that clearly it?
It's like a marriage, we always say, and the key to a successful marriage is just say yes, dear, and so yes, Greg, whatever he wants.
So, all right. So you've been together long enough to know each other's pet peeves, so we thought we'd start with a few. Answer this question, Mark. Greg does not like it when. By the way, our stream is coast to coast tonight. We've got people from everywhere.
Do we have a time limit on this?
I gotta edit this in my head before. No, Greg is very particular, and he'll say, "Let's leave at 6:45," and I'll say, "Great." So I'm thinking I'm on time, and he's out in the car. He's been waiting for me 10 minutes at 6:45. He's like, just relax, Greg.
But he says 6:45, and then when you're there at 6:45, he's mad.
Yeah,
mad.
He's
wound up.
He's irate, and he likes to get to games like 5 hours before the game.
I know this.
Greg.
Yes.
Just in case of traffic.
Again, I'm working with the right guy. I just got to tell you. Yeah, I'm working with the right guy.
Because he's the yin of your, like, he's chill, and Greg's a little more one. Okay, so now the same question for you, Greg. Like, Mark does not like it when
I am asking him to be somewhere at 6:45.
We can't think of anything because we're like long lost friends, and we just kind of complete each other.
We finish each other's sentences and have for a long time. You get that way, right? In a broadcast when there's the ins and the outs. With radio, there's a lot more talking than TV. And so it's a challenge, is it not? Because one, you're not really looking at each other because you're looking forward. In TV, we got a monitor and we can have a snack and all this stuff, but
we can hit the cough button. Nobody can tell.
Timing is critical.
Yeah, well, the challenge is Mark's. Really, I can just say what I need to say. It's Mark's job to try and find the right place to jump in. When does Greg stop talking is the question, and when he does, then Mark gets a spot. And really, there's a chemistry thing that I kind of know that if I'm taking a breath, Mark has something to say, and Mark kind of tends to know when I'm about to, leave a space or give him some room, and it's been after this long. You do it without even thinking, and you expect something without even needing to plan for it. People ask, often when talking about broadcasters and your broadcast partners, did you hold auditions? Do you do tryouts? Do you do a fake game? Do you call off a monitor and see how it goes? And I've never ever had any kind of audition or tryout or simulate a game with any of the people I work with. It always just goes off a feel thing, and it didn't take us long after meeting each other formally for the first time to think that we'd have something. And it's 28 years later, here we are.
Yeah. Well, one thing Blaine and I have been able to do is keep violence out of our relationship, but you've taken a lot of shots
for the most part.
For the most part.
It's a good thing Mark's a sturdy individual.
But see, we see the video clips and you celebrate that. So this is no mystery here. You take it, don't you? You take one for the team.
I'm not a small guy, so I can pretty much take it. But it's fun. I love Greg's enthusiasm. I think people really love that about him, and he gets excited when good things happen, as he should. And I get excited with him. So it's I don't really notice it, but then I watch some clips after. I'm like, yeah, you know, ease up a little bit, Wrubell.
When things are going really well or things are going really poorly, who's most reactive to that between the two of you? Who's more up and down? And then does the other help level out?
Is that a question?
Yeah.
Is that even a question?
Does anyone doubt?
Well, like tell us how this works, though. Yeah. Tell us how this works.
Greg is extremely not emotional, but I think if you're listening, you know if BYU's playing really good or playing really bad. And I'm the steady ship, and he's just going all everywhere. But I think it's beautiful. I mean, I think that's a compliment to Greg that, you know, the great announcers that I think of, it's exciting and they get into the plays, and so you know, I think part of the magic of our partnership is that we are so different, and I'm pretty steady. I get excited, but I'm pretty steady, and Greg, it reflects the moment, and I think it's beautiful.
Like he gets excited like a CPA would. Would that how you define that?
No, the great thing about Mark is he's been there.
A good CPA.
Yeah, he's been there and in uniform, and he has lived the highs and the lows, and so his perspective on what's happening is as valuable, if not more, than my descriptive element of the equation. I respect so much his background and his family's background and what that brings to the broadcast, and so I'm the guy that hasn't done it. I just get to talk about it, but Mark always gets to bring that perspective of somebody that's been through it and has heard the cheers and has, you know, walked off the floor victorious, and has, you know, he's been coming up in a lot of broadcasts this year for the streaks that Mark had as a player. He was an Iron Man. Mm-hmm. He was an every game guy. He played through stuff, and then he's up there in all these top 5s and top 10s for games played and games won and consecutive games played. And I put him in a trivia question last week. He and his brother Devin were both guys that finished their careers 50% or better from the field. He was an excellent player, and got to postseasons and played in the NCAAs. He brings everything to the table that I'd want from a broadcast partner in terms of a guy that's able to share with the audience everything we're describing for them at the highest level.
It's interesting in a season like this. Iowa State game's a great roller coaster of events. You know, they're way out in front, and we're all kind of euphoric about it, and then they start to come back, and now we're gritting our teeth while we're calling the game or involved in the game. And how quickly after a game can you, for lack of a better phrase, just kind of let it go?
Chill out.
So yeah, can you just chill out? Because I mean, I go home after a big game. Even after the Utah game, we did the post-game show. We get home after midnight, and Brenda's already in bed ready to go to sleep. She goes, "You come to bed?" I'm like, "No, I need to go like stare at the fireplace or something. Like my head's still going. Like I can't stop this." How long for each of you does it take to wind down, win or lose, and be able to just kind of turn your mind off and get away from it?
Yeah, well, like Greg said, I mean, I cared so much for so long that it's hard for me to care as much anymore, and it's easier for me to recover from a loss. Now, there are some games, like if BYU would have lost that Iowa State game because it's such a big game and such a big opportunity, that would have rattled me a little bit, or losing to Utah always rattles me. But otherwise, you know, once I leave the gym, let's go get something to eat. And I sleep like a baby because, most of my life, it was my life. And now I just enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, it's awesome. On the live stream, David's in from Hong Kong as we now are spanning the globe, and so great to have Cougar Nation with us. And here's a Cougar Nation question for you. We'll talk about the players and the team in just a bit, but this journey to get to 23-8, what's it been like for you?
Well, I think you have to first start with where they were, right? At one point, they were 15-8. You know, and they were 2-4 in the Big 12. So from where they were to where they are, it tells the story of this season. They were on the outside looking in. Then they climbed to somewhere close to the bubble. Then they were a bubble team for a couple of weeks, and then they got themselves locked. And to do that, you almost have to win, 6, 7, 8 games in a row in a league this good. But that's what they did. It's remarkable. I in our pregame the other day, I kind of brought this up as a proposition to Mark. Have we ever seen a better sustained run of regular season basketball since we've been calling games together? And you could go back to that COVID team of 2019-20 that won its last 9 WCC games to end the regular season, and that didn't get to show it in the postseason because of COVID. That was a pretty dominant run too. But this is the Big 12. I mean, in all these wins they were picking up, it was just quad one after quad one after. You weren't going to have that in the WCC. So I think all things being relative in terms of the caliber of play, the caliber of opposition, tough to argue that we just didn't witness the best, month and a half of regular season basketball that BYU's played since we've called these games because of the kind of people they had to beat and where they won. They won in Morgantown. They won in Tucson. They won at Hilton and Ames.
So how much fun is that for you?
Oh my gosh, I've been floating for weeks now. It's just like what game can you doubt them now? Can you doubt them now? Can you doubt them now? Because they keep on just checking the boxes. All these tremendous wins. Some programs go years without winning in any of those buildings, let alone winning in 3 in all of them within weeks of each other. Yeah. It's outstanding what they've accomplished, and I don't even know that it's being truly reflected in the current brackets or the seed list. To be this good, you're probably better than an 8. You're probably better than a 7. And maybe I might take a 6, but 5 feels a little more in line. And so they get a great chance this week to boost themselves even maybe higher on that seed list. But I'll let Mark jump in here with this. But in terms of a run of play, it's tough to top it.
And the fun meter for you? Been good?
Off the charts. This has been as fun a season as I can remember in those 28 years. And it seems like this should be a movie with Gene Hackman, rest in peace. I mean, you start out and you're like questioning each other. Is this team even going to make the top 8? And, can they somehow find a way just to get a win on the road, let alone win multiple games in such tough places? And then all of a sudden they kind of find each other and they build. And now they beat Kansas. That was a 100-year loss for Kansas. Mm-hmm. It's just remarkable. And then to do what they've done, I can't wait to see how the movie ends, man. If it gets better than what it has been, it's going to be special.
Oh, let's hope for a Hoosiers ending, man. So with all of that, as you think back on this season in its entirety, is there a game, and I'll ask you both this. We'll start with you, Mark. The biggest surprise, the biggest disappointment, and the most satisfying game. So, is there a game that surprised you the most? You mentioned that Kansas game. Is there one that you were really disappointed in? And there was the one that was kind of like the most satisfying of all the games.
Kansas was the one. I thought BYU could win, but how it happened was just, it blew my mind.
Is that the most surprising then for you?
Surprised. Okay. I was completely and utterly shocked by the way BYU just absolutely dominated one of the best programs in the history of college basketball.
Yeah.
And so that was really cool. Disappointed. I always hate losing to the Utes, but I thought Providence was pretty disappointing the way they played. What was my other?
Your most satisfying win.
I think winning at Arizona was very satisfying, and I would have said Iowa State if we hadn't already done it at Arizona. And that another brand name of college basketball in one of the toughest buildings to play in the country. And I personally didn't think BYU had much of a chance, and they proved me wrong. And now I don't doubt them anymore. I'm like, there's no game that they'll play from here on out that I will doubt that they can win it.
So you're saying Arizona because you wondered if they could do it, and then they did it. But going to Iowa State, you thought they can do this, and then they did. So that's why the Arizona State game was, or the Arizona game was just a little bit more satisfying than the Iowa State game. I love that. What about you, Greg?
I guess this is why we're good teammates. I'm going to go with Mark on the Kansas game. I think Providence was disappointing in a way, but it was so early. Jaeger gets hurt early. There are a couple of asterisks on that game for me. They weren't really who they are now. They were starting a different group. It was disappointing at the time, I think, for how kind of thoroughly they were handled in their first road test. But then the Utah game, a game that I really think they should have won and didn't win. That was to me the most disappointing. It's the rivalry game. You got it where you needed to be, and kind of just the fact that I'm with Kevin Young. It said that game left a sour taste in his mouth, and that for me too. So I'll go with that one for disappointing, just because of how different they were and are from the Providence game. And then for most satisfying, I'm gonna put Arizona and Iowa State in a tie, because in both games it looked like, as well as BYU played, they might actually take the L. When Caleb Love hits that three late, and now you're down, and the crowd's going nuts. Well, I guess he made a big shot, and then the play for Richie. If they don't blow the whistle, you probably do lose that game. They did blow the whistle, and I'm not saying it wasn't a foul, because I believe it was a foul. But two officials chose to not call that. Thankfully, Tony Padilla did call it, because I think it was a foul, and then Richie still has to go make the free throws. So that was one where it's like, oh man, they might lose this, to wow, they just won it, I can't believe it. And then Iowa State, similarly, because I was in that building last year when they lost a 14-point second half lead and the game. And this one, you're getting some PTSD because you're up 21 or 21, I think it was, and suddenly you're down in overtime. Might this one slip away? And it didn't. So those were both really pleasant surprises that they found a way to dig themselves out and get those wins. So that covers a lot of ground, but there have been interesting inflection point games in this year, right? I think Kevin Young would say that the Providence loss, they learned a lot from it. You could say the Colorado game, being down 10 in the second half, rallying to win their first away game of the year, was an inflection point game. I think the Kansas game is an inflection point, because I think it allowed Kevin Young to go into that locker room and say, guys, see what I was telling you? Do you believe now that you're a good team? Do you believe now that you're as good as I think? Because I think that was something he had to fight with his guys to get to buy into, was, hey, you're a really good team too. Yeah, they've got the Hall of Fame coach. Yeah, it's Kansas, but you're a good BYU team. I think that was the day where they all kind of said, yep, this is who we are and who we can be. When you were talking earlier before we came on about maybe getting to see Houston if it works out well in Kansas City, I think there's no better way to show just how far BYU's come from that 30-point loss at Houston to get them again and see where the changes have been made. Hopefully it gets to that point, which means getting past the tough game on Thursday. But if it does get to that, I'm anxious to see, just for that display and demonstration of where they are from where they were.
So pleased to have BYU basketball announcers Greg Wrubell and Mark Durrant on the Wise Guys, presented by Brady Plus, distributed by the Deseret News. On this roster, who would you say, Mark, is the biggest surprise as we sit at the end of the regular season?
Well, I guess the easy answer is Richie, but I'm really not that surprised. I thought that he had it in him to be a real three-point threat. He's got a quick jumper and is a good shooter, and I knew he was really crafty around the rim. But to kind of take on that mantle and lead this team has been really fun to watch, because there's no bigger fan of Richie than me, and to see him do what he's doing has been super fun. I like Mawut. Mawut was kind of out of it, and Richie then got his concussion in that game at the Delta Center and came and said, here's my chance. I love guys that, when presented with an opportunity, they step up and they take advantage of it. And Mawut has been absolutely integral to everything BYU's done. And
so would Mag be your guy of just hey, I'm kind of surprised that worked out that way?
Yeah, I would say with where he was at earlier in the season, and we knew he was a defensive guy, right? But he's a great offensive player and is unfazed by everything. He's the guy that almost always seems to hit the big three at Iowa State, at Arizona, whatever. And I think he's, because of what he can do on both ends of the floor, and he's not the superstar, but he's the guy that makes other players better. I think I would go with Mawut.
What about you, Greg?
So I'm with him on that. And again, I think
guys can't be with each other
on everything.
No, we happen to think similarly. Richie went from glue guy, right, to go-to guy. That's a huge jump. That's why he's the most improved player in the Big 12 as voted today, right? So, but again, are we surprised? No, I think we believed that much in Richie, that he could be that good. I thought when he chose to come back to BYU, that was the development. Besides, of course, Kevin Young himself coming on, I thought that was the key. So I'm going to go with Mawut. He went from a very inefficient player at Rutgers. He basically doubled his efficiency rate. Not quite, but he really jumped his efficiency numbers, I think by 50% from last year to this year. So he went from being kind of an afterthought offensively to being one of the most productive and efficient guys on offense for BYU, and plays his role to a T. A 5-year guy that comes in, doesn't pout, doesn't mope when he's not starting or not seeing a lot of minutes, and then becomes just an absolute keystone to this Big 12 equation once he gets in the game. So I gets in the rotation. So I'll go with Mawut for that reason. But I want to kind of add another surprise, and it's a grouping of guys. Surprised, rather pleased that Dallin Hall, Fousseyni Traore, Dawson Baker, who've all been go-to guys, either on this team or other teams, have embraced and fulfilled their roles from this season. Dallin was a starter. Foose was a starter. Dawson was like a leading scorer at UCI. And they're all huge parts of this puzzle this year by embracing the role that Kevin Young has for them off the bench. And I think without that embracing of those roles, it'd be hard to do what BYU is doing right now. And then the larger surprise is that BYU, in contrast to most other BYU and other teams just generally nationally at this time of year, is getting more from more guys instead of asking for more from fewer guys. We've all seen the rotation. It gets 6, 7, 8 players max by this time. That's not been BYU. That's surprising that you can be that good with that deep and that expanded a rotation. That's been a surprise, a really pleasant surprise that you can do that. Sometimes might expand it because they just have no answers. They're looking for anybody, somebody. And that's not this situation. They've got answers, and they just want more and more of them.
Having said that, quick, yay or nay from both of you. Does BYU have the best bench in the league?
Certainly the deepest, and the ability of any of those guys to have a big night, like Foose could get 20. Dallin got 15 the other night. It's pretty impressive.
So with that said, the Cougar Board question of the week was, what benefit does this 11-man roster or rotation give BYU in the tournament? Will it have a meaningful impact if they get to the Houston game? Does this make a difference in this format where you can play 3 nights in a row?
Was it the West Virginia game where Kaba gets 2 quick fouls, I think, and Foose ends up with a 20 and 10? I think that's where you're seeing, you can get somebody in foul trouble and not suffer as a result. Richie was in foul trouble for the first time in I don't know how long against Utah on Saturday night.
2 quick ones.
And yet they've got places to go. It benefits in a lot of ways. Just the fact, too, that Richie, after 31 games, he's still averaging only 29.4 minutes per game. He's the go-to guy and doesn't even hit 30 minutes a game. Yeah. That is huge. Most of the other stars in this league, they're all between 30 and 38 minutes a game because they have to be on the floor that long. Richie could certainly do it. He played, 47 in Ames? Okay, you have those nights where you need Richie to be 47 minutes, but on most nights, you can spread it around.
To your point, though, this team, I think, is built for tournaments because of how many guys they play. Because those are, that's a gauntlet. Imagine playing 5 games. BYU's got to play 3, and that's a lot. And you don't have a lot of recovery time. So if you're able to play a guy like Richie 25 instead of 35 minutes, then he's going to be fresher. And you really saw it a couple times at the Marriott Center this year. Kansas, for one of them. They're traveling across the country at altitude, playing against 12 guys, and they're just gassed, man.
On the chat, Conrad Munson says, hey, I think a good case for MVP, we'll go back to that, is Mawut. He brought in a change in our defense that wasn't obvious analytically, but we were able to get crucial stops in crunch time. You guys both alluded to him. I've talked to multiple players, including when we had Eric Mika here on the show, on the record, said, all these 3 different players I talked to, former players, said the direction of this team changed to this type of a trajectory when they started to play Mawut more minutes. And as soon as he was inserted in the starting lineup, there was an elevation of this team, and it's been going that way ever since. Would you agree with that? Is that a seminal point in the season when he became a regular?
Yeah, I think it coincides fairly well. The first glimpse we got to see was in Salt Lake when Richie goes out with a concussion early in the Wyoming game, and Mawut comes in and has his best game of the year to that point. And that kind of, not that Kevin was looking for proof, but I think it kind of showed that you give this guy that kind of time, he can contribute for you. And I mentioned his offensive efficiency, but we all know, and maybe it goes without saying, that he's such a defensive stopper and is so instinctive defensively that you are getting the complete guy when you bring Mawut in the game. And two, it took Kevin, a couple months to really get a sense of who he has and where they're best used. And so it was a process of discovery for both Coach Young and the players. And I think it's just worked out perfectly, although it did take some time. And that's a great example, too, of sometimes how seasons have to go. You're not just great from the get-go.
Well, I think we as fans also had to adjust because you had the two freshmen come in that were going to the NBA, right, in the lottery. And so when you think of NBA guys that had come to the Marriott Center, they were 25 and 15, right? They were going to the NBA. Now all of a sudden BYU has two touted to be headed that way. And I think it took a while for the fans to go, wait a second, they're 18 and 19, and they're going to be that way for a little bit. And then once they did, and Yegor settled down, even Cannon was hot and cold, but it wasn't going to be, we got two NBA guys, we're going to the Final Four. And we were there for the blue-white game and the exhibition game and the early on. And is that not what everyone kind of expected?
Yeah, it's unfair, I think, to those guys because they are NBA guys, but they're 18. They are so young. You spent some time with Diego, not that he's immature, but he's young. Think about Dave McCann at 18. I mean,
anyway. Now you're going back to Orem High School.
He couldn't dribble.
I don't know if you want to go there.
He couldn't even dribble at 18.
I don't think you want to go there.
You could blow over 18-year-old Dave McCann with a strong gust of wind.
Yes, you could.
And what I like about these guys, especially Yegor, I mean, what a great game he had the other night. He's getting better. What I like is trajectory. I just want guys to get better. He's learning how to have the kind of pressure that Iowa State throws at you, and he's getting better. And you talked about Mawut. He's getting better every game. And Keba Keita, I think, is getting better every game. He's become an absolute force. And a guy like Trey Stewart, you talk about defense. Trey Stewart, I used to love him on the floor, but I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen with him. He's gonna make bad shot or throw it away or something, and now I have complete confidence in Trey. So what I like about this team is there's so many guys that are on an upward trajectory, and individually and as a team, and it's been fun to watch.
Well, doesn't it tweak the fan base a little bit, Greg, too, to be more prepared next year when more guys of this caliber come in, and then the year after and the year after that, hey, they can be awesome. They can be ranked number one, but they still they can't be 19 until they're 18.
Yeah, I think the expectations will be higher for AJ than they were for Cannon or Yegor, because I think he comes with a higher profile. Mm-hmm. As much as Cannon was a great get, and so too for Yegor. I think AJ is at a different level. AJ might be the rare guy that's able to.
AJ might dominate as a freshman, right? Is that possible?
I think it is. I'm not saying it has to be the expectation, but I won't be surprised if he's the kind of guy that looks like a little more and by no means that any of these guys comes in as finished products, but that he might be more toward that. He seems to have some exceptional attributes that you just don't find every day, which is why he's the number one recruit in the country.
We've had some folks on the chat commenting about, hey, is this guy going to, is Yegor going to go and go out after this year? What about Cannon with the injury? Does he come back? And people come up to me almost every day and say, Yegor's not ready for the NBA. Why are they still projecting him as a top 12 pick or a top 10 pick? And so what's your answer to that? Because he's probably going out after this year.
What's your answer to that?
My answer to that is always the NBA doesn't draft 18 or 19-year-olds for who they are today. They draft them for who they're going to be, because they realize if they have that 8 pick and they need a 6'9" point guard that they can develop, he's not going to be available next year, and they might not have that pick next year. So they'll invest and they'll develop him on their dime and on their time. And so, he's going out. That's my answer. But I don't know. Am I crazy?
No, there's always picks on potential and development, which is why they would do it. The one thing that's different from, say, the same question asked 5 years ago is the fiscal component. The player's not motivated to go now strictly because of money. I want to start making money, or I can get the big payday by being a lottery pick. They now know, if they choose to look at it this way, I can still be taken care of financially and develop under an NBA guy in Kevin Young and enjoy everything that the BYU season's been about this year for these players, which has been a pretty phenomenal season. So I think the pressures aren't what they were before, or the motivations aren't what they were before. They're there, but they're lessened a little bit by the fact that for their age and the kind of money available to them, you can be pretty content and still be in a collegiate situation with a guy that I think when Kevin Young talks to these guys, they can trust him as much as anybody as to what the next level is going to be or what they're asking from these guys at the next level, because he truly knows better than most college coaches now. That said, imagine if the proposition was, if you come back, we could have, this player and that player and that player and that player. What could BYU do with this group of talent? And you might have a season unlike any other before. Yep. I just wonder who values what, and we'll soon find that out.
Mm-hmm.
I think one important thing to understand is that Yegor's from Moscow, Russia. His dream is to play in the NBA. He has no connection to BYU other than he's here now.
Right.
And I think he's having an amazing time. He seems to really love it. So maybe that'll get him back. But, he's got no obligation to come back or no real loyalty. You develop loyalty playing here, obviously, this year. But this kid from Russia that wants to play in the NBA, if he gets that opportunity, I think he should take it. But like Greg said, it's not as cut and dried as it was in the past.
No, you come to college, you meet people, you might make more money. The Eric Mika was on the show just the other night. He said, if there was NIL, I'd have been back. Imagine
he's not going to come back for 2 more years at least, right?
And now all of a sudden that's a different trajectory for that team. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. And like Greg said, we'll know soon enough. BYU basketball announcers Greg Wrubell, Mark Durrant are on the Wise Guys. We're live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and wiseguys.com. We appreciate all the comments and the follows here tonight. Let's get to this week. The Big 12 tournament starts tomorrow morning. Cougs don't show up till Thursday. The tournament starts tomorrow. You guys are here. That tells you how far this program's come in a short period of time.
We will be heading to Kansas City tomorrow,
nice.
But we won't get in town till about in time for the evening games. And then I don't know what Mark has planned. We'll figure this out. But I plan
be on time. Be on time.
Yes, I'll be.
He is on time for the flights. I know he does make the flights.
Greg and I remember times when we're trying to get in the Mountain West Conference field of the tournament, and we had to get 2 wins in the last week at New Mexico and UTEP just to make the tournament. So
this was our first year together, 1997-98. That was the old 16-team WAC, I guess. And I think only the top 14 teams made the field.
Right.
And BYU was 7-21 going into that final weekend overall, and they would not have even gotten to Vegas to even play in the conference, the WAC tournament, if they hadn't gone and beaten New Mexico, which means ending their 45-game home court win streak, I think, and at UTEP. And BYU went and won at New Mexico and at UTEP in triple overtime.
And people forget how tough those two places were to play back in those days.
That was the BYU-Utah swing, right?
Yes.
That New Mexico UTEP. And so the first team we called did amazing things. Again, Steve Cleveland's first team just to get to Vegas. Yeah, BYU lost to.
And then who do we play, Greg?
It was
wasn't it Bill Self?
It was Bill Self in Tulsa.
Oh, is that right?
And Tulsa beat BYU in the first round, but the fact that we got to Vegas was victory enough. Like that was step one in the rebuild, because the year before it was 1-25, and so that first year with Steve Cleveland, just getting from 7-21 to 9-21 and making Vegas, that felt like the postseason. And you got bounced the first round, but it's all good. And then it was step by step. Then you go and you beat TCU the next year in Vegas, and you win a game, and then step by step progression. And it was really cool to be kind of in on the ground floor together and see the rebuild of BYU basketball and take these little victories. And now we're, the expectations are great, and NCAA tournament every year. But back then, just getting to Vegas for the WAC tournament meant something.
And even this year, the double bye was absurd to me earlier.
Right. 3 weeks ago even.
Let's just get to Wednesday, and then what they've done is remarkable to get in this position.
Who do you want Iowa State to play leading into that game? Would you rather have Iowa State play Cincinnati, or would you rather have him play TCU? Like, which is a tougher matchup?
Oklahoma State.
I mean, Oklahoma State. Sorry, Oklahoma State, or Cincinnati. Is that which one would be a tougher matchup? Because I'm assuming you guys wanted to play a tougher matchup, and who's a tougher matchup for Iowa State to give them a little bit of a hassle on Wednesday night, maybe even beat them before they have to play BYU on Thursday?
Man, OSU has been so up and down. They've had a couple shocking wins.
They beat Iowa State recently.
Iowa State, so that I guess that one because they've beaten them. So maybe that's the bigger challenge.
Yeah, I like that take. And then on the flip side, Cincinnati until recently was floating around the bubble, and they were ranked the entire non-conference. They really had a disappointing conference campaign, and I've got PTSD from Jizzle James at Fifth Third Arena.
He was on fire.
So
they've got some dynamic players.
Yeah.
It's just
and some great names
miss,
too. Great names.
Who are you going to get?
So I think it's sixes as to who might give Iowa State the better game. But as Mark notes, OSU has that recent win over the Cyclones to give them confidence. And then
I just hope it goes to like triple overtime.
So they're exhausted.
So they're exhausted
the next day.
And then let's say it's an Iowa State BYU rematch. How do you see that one going? Especially if they've got a tough game.
Is that a Rocky II sequel or is it the next Karate Kid?
Yeah,
sequel?
which one is it?
I mean, that may be Ivan Drago coming in here. They want to break BYU after what they did in Ames. It's going to be a ferocious battle. I mean, that defense is so intense. It's like Houston. There's never a rest. And 29 turnovers is hard to imagine in winning a game. So I think BYU will be better. But I also think Iowa State will probably be better, and it'll be a toss-up. I mean, they're two really good teams. You just hope to have a chance at the end to win.
And I think the Keyshawn Gilbert question factors into this too, right? Where is he in this whole thing? And if BYU can keep turnovers under 20, I think I like their chances.
Under 20?
That sounds like a crazy number, but when you have 29, it's not so crazy.
Against Utah, they cut them down by 19.
You had 10, right?
So it's interesting. The ESPN announcers in the Iowa State game made a comment where they said, and when we were in practice, coaches were telling them, you need to collision these guys off the screen. I don't know if I've ever heard that term used in basketball, but now that BYU's in the Big 12, I feel like I see it all the time. So literally what they were teaching was, if you're the big and you're coming out and it's a pick and roll situation, make sure you collision that guard. Like hit him. Is it too physical in this league, Mark? Sometimes I feel like they let too much go.
It's like hockey.
They play defense like Greg when he gets excited on a play, grabbing me. I mean, it was really remarkable. And Coach Young talks about, if this is the NBA, they'd foul out in the first 5 minutes, but it's not the NBA, and it's a really interesting phenomenon when you play a team like Houston and ISU that plays so physical that the referees tend to let a lot of stuff go because they're like, I can't blow a whistle every time.
Right.
And so they don't end up, people talk about losing that 21-point lead, what a disaster or whatever. Iowa State can't do that unless the officials say, it's a free-for-all.
Right.
Do whatever you want. And they got back into, and the crowd's going on. Yeah. And I don't know what you do about that. I don't know what you do. You just go out and win anyway.
Yeah. That's what
I
they
guess
did.
what you have to match that intensity then, and you have to figure out how it's going to be called, and you got to play to that level.
Well, I think toughness has been a recurring theme from Kevin Young in recent weeks, and even though BYU got out rebounded by Utah, I thought it was a tougher second half for BYU than the first half. BYU shot 60+% after halftime, and by the way, that brings up the fact that these halftime adjustments have to be applauded.
Yes.
These last three games, but primarily the West Virginia and Utah games, they turned into 52 and 51-point second halves. That's outstanding after kind of sluggish first halves in both games. I don't think there's any doubt that Kevin Young and his staff are really good at making changes on the fly and finding out what's going to work. And I think these last three games, if you throw the Iowa State game in the middle of it, how do you win a game with 29 turnovers? The West Virginia, Iowa State, and Utah games coming back to back to back are three master classes on how to win three games three different ways, which is really what we've seen. Some teams have been kind of one-trick ponies, and you could argue some BYU teams of recent vintage have been one-trick ponies. If they aren't making 35% of their threes, they're not going to win. Straight up, they're not going to win. This isn't that team.
Vern's on the stream early in Italy today.
How about that?
Hope you're.
What's really been fun about this is most Mondays we get Japan in the house, Singapore in the house, Italy in the house, several countries in South America. We've had Colombia, we had Peru, all over North America. this BYU fan base is global, and it's really fun. And you guys know that because BYU radio is all over the world as well. When you guys, I'm just interested because you've done the whole league, not the whole league because they don't play everybody in the league on the road. Where did most BYU fans? Was there ever a takeover on the road this year for any game you were at where you just thought, my goodness, BYU shows up good?
Was it ASU?
ASU definitely. There was more BYU fans.
And that's the one.
A lot of availability of tickets too. But I mean, that's a LDS hotbed, and they showed up. It was
UCF was outstanding too for how far away you were to be, and that's only a 10,000 seat building, and they do a pretty good job selling it. So for BYU fans to find those tickets, the great thing is it's. They leave the gym, they come to the bus, and in all these road venues, they got all the BYU fans waiting between the locker room and the bus to meet the guys. Very NBA-like in how people wait for the team after the game. And I know Kevin Young. It took a little while to where he was like, "This is everywhere. This isn't just here or there. It's everywhere." Yeah.
And then the Rock shows up at the Provo Airport when they fly back in, even when they get delayed a day from snow.
You're only a day late.
Yeah, and they come at 12:30 a.m. They still show up.
And that's how they roll.
It's amazing.
I had a hoodie on, so they thought I was probably one of the players. So I had to run through and get out.
That's great.
Got that feeling again.
The largest change from WCC to Big 12 is our travel situations. The kind of stuff we deal with on the road, drives through blizzards and whatnot.
Oh yeah, for sure. Couple more questions with Greg and Mark, and then they'll reveal their top 5 BYU postseason games of all time, victories in the NIT or NCAA, and we'll have a discussion about that in our time remaining together. But as far as the NCAA tournament goes, is BYU playing with house money in Kansas City?
Yes, I think they could lose and it won't affect them. If it's Iowa State and they play decent, I don't think that would change anything. They can only help themselves, I think, at this point. But I don't remember ever thinking, man, the committee really helped us there and really boosted it.
I'm not sure
I remember thinking
I don't
that
remember
ever.
you ever saying that.
So the more that you can do to reinforce your position and get a good seed, because now it's about the goalposts have really moved this year. It's like, let's hope we make the tournament. Let's just get in, and now you're talking about seeding, and we'll talk about these games, but most of the times that BYU's actually won games in the tournament is because they've had a good seed to start with, and so that's important.
You're saying we're in Will Ferrell's field goal range now? We've moved into within the kicks?
Well, Will Ferrell's range is big.
I was going to say.
Let's say they beat Iowa State on Thursday night, and it's a good game. Iowa State's ranked still, right? And then they play Houston in the semis, and let's say they lose to Houston, but it's a well-fought game. They play Houston well. Where do you think BYU ends up in the NCAA seeding?
Yeah, I think BYU, any loss won't hurt BYU as much as a victory helps BYU. I'd like to think going in, you can drop no lower than a 6, but that likely means a 7 because oft times they'll look at the Sunday play and drop you a seed line just for logistics. And so I think I'd be disappointed if on Selection Sunday BYU's anything lower than a 7. I think 7 hopefully feels like the floor for BYU, win or lose in Kansas City. But I think with a win, or if it were 2 wins, you're in 5-4 territory. And legitimately so. I don't think you need a lot of smoke and mirrors to justify if they were to end up in the Big 12 title game. So I think a seed line move up is possible, and I wouldn't think a seed line drop is possible except for logistics on the Sunday play thing.
So Lenardi has him as a 5 today. You think that'll stick? In Denver, of all places, which would be awesome.
5 in Denver would be so cool, but I mean, I've just been hurt too many times today. I
can see a 7 in Timbuktu.
A 7 in Providence. I mean, if it's not a 7 in Providence, I'm happy.
The one thing I think BYU has done is taken itself out of the 8-9 game. I'd like to believe that,
right?
Which means, of course, you meet the one in the second round if you get past the first. I'd like to push that down the line a little bit. I think by winning 8 in a row with all these quad ones and winning in names, I think they've taken themselves off the nightmare scenario would be you don't win a game in Kansas City and you're a natural 7, but they drop you an 8 on the Sunday play. That would just be heartbreaking, I think, at this point for as good as BYU, as well as BYU's played over the last 2 months. But I'll think more optimistically, although I'm with Mark. It's rare that you go into that Selection Sunday going, oh, wow, they liked us more than I thought they did.
Yeah.
It doesn't usually turn out that way.
No Sunday play usually costs them a
Duke
seed.
usually gets that.
Yeah. But I'm with you. The 8-9, I keep looking at that going, oh, man, they could win a first-round game, but I would love them to get to Sweet 16, but I don't want them to play Auburn in that second game or even Houston in that second game. So, yeah, I think they have a much better chance of a Sweet 16 appearance if they're off of that 8-9 line, for sure.
All right, let's get behind the scenes here for one more before we do our top five. What have the two of you seen in Kevin Young that makes you believe that he'll take BYU basketball either this year, next year, and coming years to the Final Four, where they've never been?
Well, obviously he has a great coaching resume, and his NBA experience speaks for itself, and so that was an amazing hire, and I didn't question any of that. And then he follows that up by bringing in just some tremendous recruits, and the recruiting job he's done just blows your mind. Just this last year and the future. But my big question mark always has been he's never coached a college game. He's never coached a Big 12 season. Does he know how to do that?
I think you were here before the season started, and you talked about that. Yeah.
But I'm so impressed with him. And Greg will back this up. I mean, he's just a great person and very straightforward, and works very hard and has a great mind. And he's getting better. Like I talked about trajectory of players. His trajectory is off the charts, and the adjustments he makes and going against the grain and going deeper rather than tightening that rotation. I mean, he's doing just a phenomenal job, and the players are buying into it, and they trust him because he's straight with them, and they respect him because of his history. But he can coach, and he can coach the heck out of it because he has made some amazing improvements and decisions to get them where they're at right now.
I amen all of that, and say that having been to an NBA Finals, having coached the best players at the highest level, those are his aspirations for the best college players he can get to BYU. And he's already shown the ability to attract talent that BYU's never gotten to Provo before. And he's already shown in his first year in the Big 12, this is an elite basketball conference now. This is a conference whose actual, if you want to take a look at the raw Ken Palm rating, although it's ranked only third, its raw rating is better than last year. It's arguably, you could say, a better top-to-bottom league than it was last year, or as good. And in his first year, he has the best offense in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Not there's any doubt he has the best offense in the Big 12 for a first-year Division I guy. Now, he's a first-year Division I guy with an incredible pedigree. Not many first-year guys come in having been at his level. That said, it's still first-year Division I. And you have to navigate a whole different set of challenges and venues that aren't necessarily the kind you see at the professional level. And in his first year, he puts together the best offense in an elite basketball conference and rips off an 8-game win streak to end the year. Let's remember, last year was a pretty good year for BYU in the Big 12. Their longest win streak was 2 games. They finished the year 2 games above 500, which is good for a tie for 5th. This year, 8 games above 500 and a tie for 3rd. That tells you all you need to know about how good a coach he is. And I think what gets not enough attention is his competitiveness. Yes, he's cool. Yes, he's chill. Yes, he's pretty straightforward and even-handed and all that. But we've seen the competitiveness come out, and I'm sure anyone that has a keen eye too on the broadcast can note it. It was, I think Mark wasn't with me in Morgantown this year, but there was a pound the scorers table moment in jubilation and exaltation and excitement in Morgantown that came out late in the game that BYU trailed. They made a play. It might have been the Mihailo and one, I think, and Kevin Young lets it out. And you can see the video clips from the locker rooms and stuff. This guy is as fiery and fired up as they get. He's not a psycho. He's not all over the place, but he, at the moment, lets it show and lets it go. And the guys love that, and I love that.
It's fun to be around, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you have someone who's honest and the same all the time, isn't that fun to be around?
Yeah, but as intense as he is, though, he does. If they do lose it, he doesn't go into a rage or he's even keeled, and I think players appreciate that too. That it's not the end of the world, and I think that helped when BYU was struggling. Yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll get it, and. But I do love, you listen to him talk about that first Utah game, and you could tell it just ate at him, and he was ready to go Saturday night and wanted to kind of avenge that one.
I think the NBA background, when you play 80 to 100 games a year, you can't lose your mind on every loss because you get a lot of them. That might have helped in some peripheral way as to how you react. And granted, there's a less of a margin for error when you're playing only 30 to 35 games. But I think Mark hits it on the head, really even keeled. And it's not that he's not talkative, because he is, but he's the kind of guy that when he gets his point out and he said what he needs to say, we're moving on to the next question. And it makes for great conversations, too. I always learn a lot with him, and we've really enjoyed our time with him.
It seems like that NBA mentality serves itself well even in college. And it's not just in losses, it's in wins. Like, he'll come on the postgame with us, and he'll still have some intensity, but then you can just tell he just goes, yeah, but that's now, and we have this game in 2 nights. So it's a real turn-the-page mentality. Whether it's an amazing win, he goes, let's celebrate it, but we got these guys next. Or, yeah, we just got our butts kicked, hated it. We're going to figure out what we did wrong, but we got these guys next. And it seems to keep this team level. Do you think that that's the NBA experience that allows him to kind of just turn the page, win or lose, and move on?
Well, I think he kind of understands that a win is a means to an end. He talks about stacking days all the time. That win wasn't the end. That win was just a step to get us to where we need to be. And so, yeah, we're glad we took that step, but there's a lot of steps moving forward, so it doesn't get too high or too low. And I think that's refreshing for a player. Like I said, when I played, that was everything. I mean, if we lost, I still think about losses to this day because it was just the worst.
It's a big deal.
But the ability to learn from it and not have that loss be more than just that loss, and it doesn't affect the next game. And I think he's got a great attitude about that.
I like that he says stuff. And sometimes you're like, well, you know what? He didn't come through here's what you don't say. He speaks his mind, like the other night, a couple weeks back, when he said, if we were in the NBA, my whole team would have fouled out tonight.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that's exactly how he feels in that moment.
Yeah.
I like that he shares it. And it keeps things fresh. 5 Questions is presented by Strategy Square, delivering connection, clarity, and confidence in business and marketing strategies. Owned and operated by a BYU alum who's helping the wise guys all around the world, as you've seen tonight on our live stream. You can reach Chantal at strategysquare.co. All right, tonight, the guys are going to roll out, and we'll have ours too, the top 5 NCAA or NIT wins of all time, including the top 5 that they've called. And we'll discuss that on the eve of the Big 12 tournament, which BYU doesn't have to show up to until Thursday, when they play Thursday morning with these guys on the call on BYU Radio. So Blaine's going to take over. We'll go 5-1. And it'll be a little discombobulated because there's 4 of us, and we'll have some opinions on stuff, and on the live stream as well. And we encourage you to weigh in.
Throw
as we talk about this.
It's not that hard because BYU hasn't won a lot of NCAA tournament.
There's a couple ones though that are like
5.
Hey.
It's like to pick 5 is not that hard. Although I have like 7 written down, so of my favorite. But let's do it this way. Let's kind of hear Mark and Greg's and we'll go back and forth. We'll start with Greg for 5, and then we'll go to Mark 5, and then we'll go Mark 4 and Greg 4, and then we'll we'll tell you what when it's all done, we'll compare ours to yours.
All right, and then Dave and I had a bit of a back and forth about this, so I left out. I kind of conceded that the biggest wins were part of the Elite 8 run in 1981, things like that. So I wanted to narrow it a little bit to the best postseason wins during our tenure.
Yeah, let's do that. We'll do this for sure.
Because they're more recent, but it still covers 30 plus years. Yeah. All right. In fact, Mark was part of an NCAA tournament win in 1993. And after that win against SMU, it was years and years and years before they got another one. So I'm kind of bringing it into that modern era, if you will. So I'm going to go best postseason wins last 30 plus years.
Okay.
And on your note, Blaine, there's only been 4 NCAA tournament wins for BYU since that game Mark was a part of. So you have to understand that all 4 are in my top 5 because they've only won 4 games. Yeah. But I want to give an honorable mention before I get to my 5, if that's okay. A little bit of leeway. And it's this game. It's kind of weird. People are going to go, what? 2000 NIT, BYU 81, Bowling Green 54. Steve Cleveland's in his 3rd year as head coach. This was BYU's first postseason win since the 1-in-25 year in 1996-97. This was the step, a postseason win. It was also the first postseason win since the NIT victory in 1994, so it had been 6 years. Eventually, BYU got to the NIT quarters. We lost at Notre Dame. which kept BYU one win away from New York City that year. So my honorable mention goes to the first Steve Cleveland postseason win because it showed BYU's on the way back from that bottoming out at 1-25. But to my number 5, it's an NIT game. BYU 79, Southern Miss 62 in the 2013 NIT quarterfinals. Southern Miss was an NIT Region 1 seed. They were playing at home in Hattiesburg, sold-out crowd. Tyler Haas had 25, Brock Zylstra 23. It gets BYU to Madison Square Garden for the first time since the 1966 NIT Finals.
Wow.
So that's number 5 for me.
All right.
Okay.
That's cool.
What about your 5?
Greg, as with most things, has put a lot more thought into it.
No, this is awesome though. That's
Really
a great.
did.
And I love the honorable mention one because it has meaning to the program, right? That was a great honorable mention.
I guess my 5 is the BYU Iona game. I hate the playing game more than life itself, but that was a big. They just ran away with
number
it.
25
They came back from
25 points
they
down.
Came back. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
They came back from.
Yeah, that made
was a
both
record or
Dave
something. Was that a
and
record?
mine because of the comeback.
Still a record, by the way.
Yeah, just
Still a
because of the
record.
comeback.
Before we move on to number 4, what was the
Brock
emotional
Zylstra.
swing? What was the emotional swing in that broadcast?
Well, it's funny. Mark actually wasn't there in Dayton for that game because he hates the playing game so much. He boycotts them.
Uses to
He's like,
broadcast
I'm not going out to Dayton for that
So
game.
who did you have on? Was it Terry?
It's just
It was
Greg.
Brian Sent. No, in fact, I was by myself.
Oh, you're
And
by
he was
yourself.
And here's the crazy thing.
You had
I
to
was-
handle that by yourself?
I was sick going into it.
No.
And by the end of the night, I had nothing.
If I'd have known, I would have come. But
No,
he
I was already sick, and I think Brian Santiago joined me for a little bit of pregame, but then he couldn't do anything during the game. I literally did the biggest comeback solo, and because I went in sick, and because the emotions were so, if they had stayed a 25-point blowout and BYU lose, that would have been fine. But the comeback killed me. I got so excited, and I already went in with throat issues that by the end of the night, literally, I was done. I had to call. I was after that game. I'm in suburban Dayton. I'm driving to a 24-hour pharmacy at midnight to pick up some prescriptions that a local doctor called in for me to this place in Dayton.
I thought I'd have, because I went out to Louisville, which was the next game, but only
game.
2 days. I thought I was going to have to call it because he could
couldn't
not
go
talk.
I reached out to him and I'm whispering over the phone and he's like, oh my gosh, I had to go get drugs at midnight to get me going on something to help. And I drove down to Louisville from Dayton because it was close-ish. And in those 2 days, a lot of prayer, a lot of tea, a lot of meds, and somehow I had something for that next game against Marquette.
Honey and lemon tea, right?
That's
man.
definitely top 5.
And here's the thing,
That's fantastic.
That arena, like we got to give. I hate the first 4 too, but let's give props to the city of Dayton. They embraced that thing.
Yeah.
Like they filled that arena. I mean, I've probably called 10 games in that arena because I did the A10 for a lot of years, but. Those fans are good fans. I bet they were going nuts in that game.
That was a
during
wild one.
comeback.
And
even local fans would have been going
and
nuts.
Mark legit did think he'd be calling the Thursday game because he knew I had nothing.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So, okay, now we're going to start with you for your number 4.
I don't know how you can top number 5. But
5 is good.
Maybe I'll go with my win. Yes, over SMU and
Yeah.
93, I think.
Yep.
And
how
this
many
is
points did you get?
like
How many points?
I don't know, probably it was a Mark Durrant stat where
Lot
I
of
probably
rebounds.
had more fouls than
18 and
points.
9.
A lot of rebounds.
If you get more fouls than points, that's called a Mark Durant.
Is this what they call it now?
Is that what Devin calls it? That's how he looks at it.
Devin falls out of bed and gets more points than I do in a game.
Where was the game, Mark?
It was in Chicago, and as a runner up to that, we played Kansas the next game and had a really good chance. We were tight late, and a couple calls didn't go our way. So even though we didn't win that was a good team that we had.
That was 93 team. Yeah, that was a very, very good team. What about your 4, Greg?
My number 4, BYU 74, Wofford 66, 2011 NCAA Tournament first round. This is the first game on the path to the Sweet 16. Jimmer scored 32, matching his jersey number, became the first and only player to score 1,000 points in a single season. In that game, he hit 1,000.
All right. A lot of 1,000-point career scores, but not single season scores.
Yeah. Mine is the next game, Gonzaga. Isn't that right, Greg? And we had watched Gonzaga play. I think it was Sacre.
St. John's, the soccer team, they played St. John's,
Yeah.
right?
They demolished them, and they looked so good. I thought, there's no way we have any chance against these guys. And we just demolished them. I think Jimmer had 35 or
It was
something.
insane. His highlights are still on.
So you talk about the 2011 Gonzaga game.
Yeah.
That's your 3 then.
Yeah.
And Jimmer had 34 in that game. They killed him. 89-67. So that's your 3. What's your 3, Greg?
My 3 is the Iona game.
Oh, okay. So it's all coming around here. It's all coming around here.
Yeah. And so,
just so you know, if you'd have saved that story for the 3, it would have much more drama than wasting it at the 5.
Yeah.
But we get
giving
it.
you
We
radio
get it.
tips, Greg. I don't know.
Noah Hartsock had 23, and Davies had a double-double in that game. That was the comeback. And the great thing
Is that still a tournament record?
it's still the tournament record today. Largest NCAA tournament comeback. So,
Unbelievable.
Iona's number 3 for me.
So yours is the Gonzaga game. Yours is the Iona game for number 3. And then the Gonzaga game, they followed that up. That's when they lost to Florida,
Right, in the Sweet 16.
in overtime, Sweet 16. Okay, because that was a great year. Okay, now we'll go with Greg's 2.
My 2 is the 2010 NCAA first round, so Jimmer's junior year.
Yeah.
This is BYU 95, Florida 85 in double overtime. BYU advances out of the first round for the first time in 17 years. That's why this one's so significant, because they were losing every time they got to the dance. They got out of the first round, snapped an 8-game NCAA tournament losing streak. Jimmer tied the BYU NCAA tournament single-game scoring record, BYU's record, with 37. He and Danny each have a 37-point game in the NCAAs. That's the record. Michael Lloyd Jr., by the way, had the game. He had 26 in that game, and he was people don't remember, like, if there's ever a guy like he'll be under everyone's radar, but among the most clutch tournament performances was Mike Lloyd Jr. in that game. He had 26. Yeah.
So that's the Florida game, right?
Yeah, gets him out
overtime,
of the first round.
and that also got him 30 wins that season, right? So that's on mine as well. That one's on mine because it got him to 30 wins and it kind of started things going where, like, this team could be something next year too. So okay, then we'll go your number 1,
Number 2.
or number 2. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I like that one, but since Greg mentioned it, and since I didn't exclude that run, the Danny Ainge run, I'm
There
going
you
to go
go.
with
We didn't exclude it either.
Princeton. I think was they won by 1 right before the Notre Dame game. I think it was a pretty intense
Was it
game.
Princeton, UCLA, Notre Dame? Was that the March?
He went Princeton, UCLA, Notre
Yep.
Dame.
Yeah. Yep.
And
Princeton they beat by 1.
Right.
And it seems like they beat UCLA pretty good.
Danny went off in that
By a
UCLA
bunch.
game. Yeah, they killed them, and then the Notre Dame game was a
1-point game.
sweet game.
And just you talk
Why
about
did they
that
have to
run.
play Ralph Sampson of Virginia?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, even though they lost that's a pretty big one too. That's
Yeah,
probably
that was
pretty high on my list, and they were
pretty
in
amazing.
that game.
Hey,
And-
Ralph Sampson didn't kill him. Jeff Lamp. killed
Yeah,
him from the
stinking Jeff
outside.
Lamp.
Yeah.
So
All right,
let's
that's a good one.
Number 1 for you.
Yeah, and keep in mind I excluded everything before 1994 basically. So I'm going to just read modern era. My number 1 was the Gonzaga win in 2011 because it advanced BYU to the Sweet 16 for only the second time in the expanded NCAA tournament era, and the first time since the Ainge run in 1981. Jimmer had 34. And it tipped off the rivalry with Gonzaga, right? Because the next season, BYU would join the West Coast Conference, and then BYU and Gonzaga had so many memorable games afterward. But this was the one that kind of said, we're coming to your league. And BYU won going away. And again, it meant that BYU got to play in a second weekend. Which hadn't happened since we'd started calling games. So they got out of the first weekend.
Since.
Yeah, they got out of the first weekend, and so just making it to the Sweet 16, knowing you were going somewhere else, and it was New Orleans in this case. I still remember the euphoria afterward, making phone calls, get us to New Orleans.
That was an expensive flight.
We got to go. We got another place to go. So to me, in the modern era, that is the post-Mark Durrant era, if you will, that's number 1 for me.
I love that CBS was there and Jimmer put on a show.
remember,
He had the
it was
iconic Sports Illustrated cover back when SI was a thing. Jimmer making that shot against Gonzaga in that game, like that was the one for me.
That season was a magic. That's one of the most fun seasons I've ever had calling basketball because I was on the Mountain West package that year, remember? And you had Jimmer in the league who's going nuts, and you had Kawhi in the league who's going nuts. Even that Florida game without Brandon Davies is an overtime game, and Florida advanced, I think, to the Final Four that year. I'm just thinking what could have been, but what an amazing group of players with talent that played well. That was a fun one. What's your 1, Mark?
Well, unless you're Greg Wrubell and you're qualifying all your lists.
You've got no
if you're
restrictions.
if you're a BYU fan and Danny Ainge at Notre Dame isn't your number 1, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
He's number 1 on both of ours, by the way. He's Notre Dame game.
An all-time expansive thing,
I had to concede that's going to be number 1.
Yeah,
That is the number 1, but yes.
Well, And yeah, we both had that.
The stream has been talking about Notre Dame all night.
I didn't look at his before I did mine. I did mine, and he and I both had Notre Dame as number 1 and UCLA as number 2 because it was the deepest run we've ever had in the NCAA tournament as a team. So we both picked that.
And the excitement about that and this list. And we also, if you throw in all times, you got to include the NITs.
Yeah, the 51 NIT championship.
66.
Amazing.
Won 2
teams.
titles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting in 51 is they win the NIT, and then they accepted an invitation to the NCAAs because the NCAAs wasn't the thing, right? It came after the NIT, so they went to both that year.
Yeah.
And so 51's got to be on there as we go old school.
And then we have a mixture of all the other ones that you guys mentioned. The one other one that I threw in here that nobody had on theirs was the 91 upset of Virginia in the first round. That was a 10-7 matchup.
That was Huntsman Center, wasn't it?
It was at Salt Lake City.
Yeah, I was
remember,
at that one.
that team won the WAC championship tournament. They won the WAC tournament that year. Sean Bradley was a freshman. Was blocking shots like they were going out of style that season, and it was a team. I remember some of the guys on the team. Shane Knight was on that. Was it Knight? Yeah, Knight. Gary Trost was on the team. It's just like a bunch of fun guys.
That was the second year of Mark's mission. He was back the next year.
Mark Heslett, Nate Call, just a bunch. It reminds me, not quite the level of talent, but just kind of a team with Sean Bradley blocking shots.
Think what they could have done
if you had not been on your mission. Yeah,
a lot of people say that about Devon.
Better if Bradley came back another year. One of those two.
So it was that 10-7 matchup, and they win that game 61-48. They dominated in that game in 91. It was like, okay, like here we go. BYU in the NCAA tournament. They had to face Arizona, the 2 seed in the second round, so they lost in that one. But that's when I remember watching, and I remember that group of guys. And so I throw that one out there too as an honorable mention for me.
One of my favorites though in a loss is when they played LSU and Shaq, and
yes,
I was very happy to be on my mission in that one. But I say he set a record for the most
14 block
shots in a game, and I said I was in Kentucky on my mission, and he still blocked one of my shots.
Yeah. So I was at that game. I walked down on the floor during warm-ups, and I walked down past Shaq, and I got as close as I could, and I put my foot by his foot, and I went, I look like I have baby feet. Like I looked like I was a toddler. His feet were they just weren't long. They were as wide as a canoe, and I was like, this is a large human being, and he wasn't even the filled out Shaq at that point, but. Yeah, that was a shot blocking extravaganza between those two guys. That was a fun one.
Was that in Boise? The game was in Boise.
So.
Yeah, I was at that game. That was crazy.
Phenomenal stories as we march ahead. So how many days worth of clothing will we be packing as you go
full
to
suitcase,
Kansas City?
Full suitcase.
Yeah, don't jinx these guys and only pack
through
for
the weekend.
Yeah.
I'm packing forever. I'm packing through the weekend.
You pack for the finals, you guys.
Listen, after Iowa, I'm always going to pack a couple extra days. In the
You never know how
Midwest,
long
the
you're gonna be
Midwest
there.
is not your friend in the winter.
Well, they say it's going to be 60 degrees when you go back to the Midwest. It's
going to be
Well,
great.
we'll see.
Hey,
Hopefully it's a long stay.
We wish you the very
We
best.
love. By the way, I think I speak for. We love that tournament. We've only been there one time.
Yeah.
I love Kansas.
It's like the NCAA tournament.
There's like an undercurrent among. There's like a thought out there that especially the new Big 12 teams, their fans aren't big fans of Kansas. How can you not be a fan of Kansas City and tournament time in that venue with those teams? I hope it stays there forever. I don't need it to rotate. I don't want to go back to Vegas. I'm happy with Kansas City. I love that experience. 1 year and I'm like, I'm in.
Is it because of the barbecue?
The food isn't bad there.
Hey, and
it's good.
Let's face it.
It's good.
It's Ute fans that are saying it should be in Vegas.
Well,
we don't need to listen to them on this one.
I want to be in Kansas City as long as I'm doing this. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's a big time feel.
If you guys said, like, if you weren't going to pack for the finals, I was going to be mad at both of you. So I'm glad you're packing all the way through.
Have to.
So.
Hey, we wish you the best.
I don't doubt this team anymore. I mean, last year, the BYU's not going to make it, but this year, I expect them to win every game.
Do you like playing at 12:30 Eastern time, 11:30 local? Or would you rather be later in the day for Thursday's game, if you could pick?
Later. I was always a later guy.
Later, Greg?
Yeah, I think we've done enough of the early games where BYU comes out kind of weird. I'm like, uh-oh. Yeah. But and the fact that the team BYU plays will have had the 11:30 Kansas City game just the day before. They'll have done it once already. So it might take BYU a little while. But then again, these last couple games, 3 games BYU's played, look at the starts. West Virginia, Iowa State, Utah. Can you have more sluggish starts than that? And they came back and won and scored big numbers in all games. So even if they were to get a little slow off the start, I have faith that BYU is going to find a way to get it going. And maybe they'll surprise all of us and just come out guns a blazing and be again, they'll be rested. The team before still trying to recover, and maybe they pick up a nick or in the previous game, and then BYU is ready to roll. It's going to be a real fascinating study in that part of it, because BYU's been in this 2-game-a-week grind now for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they didn't have the Tuesday. It's like, ooh, body feels a little fresher going into this one. Yeah.
Right.
It's two things you guys said that give me real confidence. I've been feeling this way. Is BYU's figured out in like 3 games how to win 3 different ways. So it doesn't really matter what style this game is.
What's working, what's not working.
I have confidence.
Yeah.
Their ability to just shut down people while they're figuring it out seems unique to me for BYU in recent years, where okay, we're struggling a little bit to figure out how we're going to attack this thing, but that doesn't matter because we're just going to get stops, and we're not going to be out of the game because we can't figure out what we're doing.
Yeah.
So they stay in games, and I believe they can do that in the tournament. And then you guys talked about that Kansas game. One of my favorite things in the Kansas game was the post-game press conference with Bill Self when he said that BYU team playing like that can beat anybody.
Yeah.
And I mean, he means anybody that night. So let's hope we have a game like that. Let's get Iowa State and then have a game like that against Houston, because they can beat Houston shooting it like that. That'd be fun.
It would be fascinating to see just how a second game looks because of how the first one went.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, safe travels.
Yes, we appreciate you guys coming in. Always fun to hang out with you guys, and this is awesome to have you both in studio together.
Thanks for having us on The Feud.
That's
great.
We need a Richard Dawson here, I really think.
Be safe back there. We'll be listening to you.
Next year, when we go down memory lane again, let's then include a couple of these coming up.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yep.
All right.
That's good. So,
Greg Wrubell, Mark Durrant, they'll be on the air 10:30 Mountain Time with a play-by-play an hour before, earlier than that, for the pregame show from
what time's
Kansas
pregame show
City.
start? 9:30?
On
9:30 Mountain, 11:30 Eastern. Yeah.
9:30. So is Shep anchoring that, and then
Ben Bagley will be in the studio
Ben's
this
gonna
week.
do this one.
Yeah,
Okay.
Ben's going to have Jason has some baseball duties this week with the Cougars opening up Big 12 play against UCF.
Hey, they're playing good.
Yep.
They're playing good. We'll talk about them in just a little bit.
So,
but we'll let you guys pack.
all right.
Go
Thanks,
pack.
guys.
Yeah, we
Go
will.
pack up.
Thanks,
Get
guys.
ready
You're
to
the
go
best.
for a full go.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
See
you.
ya.